أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد والثناء لرب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وشفيء ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. So let's pick up where we left off. Um, we're continuing our discussion, which was about family matters. The overall series that we're doing is family matters, different family related issues. And this portion of the discussion has been about conflict resolution and family feuds. A lot of times they're inevitable. And more important than just the idea of a world where they don't exist is understanding how to handle them. You know, when they do come about, what's the protocol? What's the way that we're going to, what measures are we should we take in order to resolve these things? Um, the last 2 weeks, we've been also talking about conflict resolution. We've been talking about responsibility. We've been talking about accountability. We've been talking about measures that a person can take that's in their hands. Um, and now we want to get to understanding a little bit about how these things can be solved. What's the step that needs to be taken for a conflict resolution to be successful or to be resolved? When we talk about this kind of problems, and as we mentioned before, I touched on it, the idea of going to someone who is an able authority and counselor to resolve these issues. We're going to pick up there and go into a little bit more detail about what exactly does that look like. What does it look like when you go and seek help or arbitration or counsel um, in regards to any kind of problem in a family. Sometimes these dynamics are about marriage, but they're not always just about marriage. Sometimes they're parents and children, and it's necessary to be willing to get help somewhere. When there's children involved, or young adults involved, then it oftentimes is really valuable to get that outside perspective in all cases. But especially when there's young people involved, someone has to advocate for that. So even if I'm a parent that has a problem with my child, it goes a long way for me as a parent to try to find a third party to help and facilitate. Because the younger person who's less experienced, less worldly experience, might not take that initiative or might be too proud. So at least the more mature, the adult, the parent of the child that cares still about the child's well-being, if he initiates or she initiates this getting help from outside, that could be the thing that solves, the problem within the family uh, when the dynamic is related to parents and children. Um, there's steps that need to be taken first and foremost. We shouldn't jump to publicly trying to get things resolved. There's a problem between a husband and a wife. Okay, first and foremost, they should try to discuss and resolve their problem internally. The first step is not they should pick up the phone and call someone and tell them, hey, I'm having this problem with my spouse. You know, every time that happens, and it happens too often, they degrade themselves, they degrade their partner, and the person on the other end may or may not help to solve the problem. We have to be careful about this. There are people who are happy to hear about the juicy news and what's going on in someone else's house. They're happy to hear about, oh, this person has a problem with this. They're happy to want to hear all the details. And a lot of times it's not for good reasons. It's not because they're qualified. It's not because they really want to fix a problem. Sometimes it's a case of misery loves company, you know. And we have to also consider about this. When in that moment that you're in a problem or dispute, when you go and tell someone else about this problem, if they are not a just and fair arbitrator, then the only thing you have done is removed any dignity that person may have had. Then that also makes you look like a person with less dignity because you're married to this person, or you're who has no dignity, who has these problems, right? Now, if you're the other party, if you're that person that people come to tell you their problems, if you're that person that people come and say, oh, listen, this is happening, that's happening, be very, very careful. Be very careful. Because when you're the person who's on the receiving end of information about someone's personal and private life, their family life, then you have to safeguard that information or avoid even hearing that information. Right? It's not usually the best interest to do that. Those people who love gossip, the people who love to hear about what other people's problems are, these people are not well wishers. They don't want to see, solutions. Then that solution would mean that there's no more soap opera, there's no more news. Most of the time, their hearts are in listening to problems and wanting to hear about people's problems, wanting to hear about what people did. But the reality and what the people who go to these people don't realize often is that while they're looking down on the person you're talking about, they're also looking down on you. They're looking down on you. A person who's a friend doesn't want to corrupt your relationship. They might redirect you. Did you talk to your husband? Did you talk to your wife? There's a story about a man who uh, someone had heard that he had had some problems with his wife. So this friend comes to the man who's having the problems and he says to him, what's going on? Tell me the news. Man, I heard that there's some problems that you're having. What's going on with this woman? And the man, the husband at the time, looks at this man and says, now what kind of good natured husband goes around exposing faults of his wife to other people, right? And so the person goes away. Okay, fine. You're married. You can't talk about it. Fine. Eventually, they separate. The husband and wife get divorced and they separate. The friend who's the gossiper, who loves the gossip and loves to hear about what people are doing and all of that, they come back. This person goes back to this man. Hey, now that everything's over, now that you're divorced and she's remarried, she's moved on. Now you can finally tell me what the heck was she doing? What's the news? Tell me every detail. And the man responded again in a wise way. He said, what kind of man goes around talking about someone else's wife in this way? Now, that is the kind of adab and akhlaq that has to exist amongst people. It says, be careful about the person who's your friend today. Maybe tomorrow that person becomes your enemy. Maybe the person who's your enemy today, maybe tomorrow that person becomes your friend. Be careful about over investing in information. confident in being breaching confidentiality that should exist in family relationships. Everyone should not know if there is a problem in your home. So the very first step is going to the person and trying to find a way to solve the problem with the person you have the problem with. Sometimes people are willing to talk to every other person. They're willing to talk on social media. They're willing to talk to, this friend, that cousin. They're willing to talk to their parents. They're willing to talk to someone else and this person, that person. They're not talking to the person they have a problem with. This is an internal deficiency. This is a problem of that a person is having within themselves. Would you like someone, if they have a problem with you, to be honest with you? Yes. If someone has a problem, would you like them to at least come and to have the respect and decency to talk to you directly? Every human being wants this respect. No one wants to hear from a third party things about themselves. It's very disheartening. And then if you get to the point of trying to reconcile and fix a relationship after you have aired out dirty laundry about someone, it's very difficult because they don't trust you, and rightfully so. So, step one, please understand that in fixing a problem, you have to try to be willing to resolve with the person who you have the problem with. And you have to do so with the best kind of akhlaq, right? A parent is mad at their child. The child's not listening. They're not following directions. So they should solve it internally. So they say, I'm going to go solve it internally. I asked them, well, what did you do? According to, and this is where it gets very interesting. The parent says, I just went and sat and I talked to the child. I told them, Baba, don't do this. This is not good. You should do this. It's okay. I asked the child, what happened? I said, this person comes in, banging on the door, yelling at me, throwing things, telling me I'm some kind of, calling me names, telling me that if I don't do this, threatening me, they're going to do this, they're going to do that to me. That's two very different stories about the very same event. This is the story of what happens in a lot of relationships. You listen to two different people tell the story, it sounds like two different stories, right? Now, to the parent is telling me the story and saying that, I was so nice. I came, I talked and did this, and I just told them. The child is telling the story like this person was trying to bite my head off. Right? So we have to we have to approach with better character, better akhlaq, you know, when we want to resolve the problem. If we come harsh, there's ayat of Quran about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You know, um, the reason why this ayah is particularly important is because it's talking about what would have happened if the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was so nice to people, who was so kind, what do we refer to him as? Rahmatan al alameen, a mercy to the world, mercy, kindness, forgiveness. It says that by the mercy of Allah, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. By the mercy of God, by the mercy of Allah, you dealt with them gently. You dealt with this group of people gently. And if you had been فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ, if you had been harsh-hearted, if you had been rough, if you had been loud and mean when dealing with people, they would have run away from you. You, rahmatan lil alamin, the mercy of the world is because of the way that you dealt with people. That's a huge part of it. And if you didn't deal with people in this way, then they would have run away. We have to understand that. So you have a problem with somebody, you want to fix it. Understand the moment that you start lashing out at them, the moment that your tongue becomes like a sword or a weapon, a what do they call it? A whip, and it becomes sharp, and you're hurting people with your tongue, that is the moment where that is finished and will not be very successful. It ends before it starts. Yes, try to resolve within, but you have to do so with the right akhlaq. You have to do so using the right tone of voice. You know, sometimes people make a mistake about something, they convolute the issue. There's a time when you have a right to be upset. Someone took away your house, they did something wrong to you. You have a right to be upset, but also in if you are practicing this idea of mercy, then you won't transgress and go above excess in your response. Yes, you are in the right, but at that time, if you go too far, just because you did something to me, I'm upset. Now that gives me the green light that I can just say anything I want to, any way I want to. No, this is not okay. And we have to think about what is the reason for that. If a person wants to solve a problem, right? If they truly care about the person and about the issue, then they're going to approach it in a way that can help. If I approach the issue in a way that does not solve the problem, by me being harsh, then then what is my purpose for that? That purpose is for me to fulfill my nafs. I want to feel good about myself. So then I said what I said in a harsh way. Or I approach it in a very, uh, uh, angry tone, and I feel justified because I feel righteous that I am in the right. But the only person I'm pleasing is shaitan. The only thing I'm doing is trying to satisfy my lower soul. Because if my intention is to fix the problem, then I should approach it in a way that's going to fix the problem or give it at least a chance. And that has to be with proper adab of conversation. Let's go to step two. You sat down with good akhlaq, you tried to work it out, you tried to have a conversation. Maybe the other person didn't want to listen, or they won't listen, they won't have the conversation, they'll avoid you. Maybe you had the conversation, but it wasn't conclusive. You weren't able to get to any results. What should you do at that point? We have in the Quran this recommendation where it advises us, like for example, in the issue in the matter of a husband and wife, it advises them to find someone to come and to arbitrate between them, someone from each side, from the husband side and from the wife side, to come together. فَابْعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا. Then appoint a judge, an arbitrator from his people and from her people. So that these people who are wise, this doesn't mean every person should do that. It doesn't say, fab'athu, you know, someone, just appoint any person. It says someone who is of wisdom, right? A person who's going to be able to look at the problem fairly, who might even say to the person that you're in the wrong. Right? We yes men and people who just agree and just support blindly are never helpful in these kind of situations. Because you need to be able to, if I'm wrong, I need someone to be able who's close to me to be able to tell me that I'm wrong. Or not, or sometimes it's the other extreme. People who they have a problem with this family member, so they always see them as wrong. They can't see anything right about them. This is another problem. We're not looking for these people who are in extreme. We're looking for people who have wisdom, insight, who have so who are pious. They don't have to be the most knowledgeable person on the planet. Within your family, there's someone who's a little more wise. Maybe they have a little more experience. They should try to help in reconciliation and fixing the problem. Unfortunately, when this doesn't work, a lot of times it's because the person who's being appointed is not a fair person. You know, the person from the wife's family is taking the wife's side. The person from the husband's family is taking the husband's side, and not if they are right, just because they are who they are. They are related, not the right reason, right? We don't just defend people just because someone's a relative or family. This is completely against the idea of what Islam and justice is. Islam says to give to be just and fair and bearing witness about something, even if you have to say against yourself, against your family, against someone well known. It says still to that extent be fair, right? So there's this level where we're looking and we're trying to get help from outside, but not outside completely within our family, but outside of the dynamic of the people who are having the problem. Right. If there are siblings, if there are parent children, this is also a good approach where someone within this family is coming to try to offer some solutions and advice. Now, it's possible that there might not be someone. It's possible that the person who's offering solutions may not offer good solutions. And this is where we have to be ready to go to that third step. Right? The idea is that if the problem can be resolved, if there is this person who is hakam, who is a person of true wisdom, not just a person, not just anyone, a person of wisdom. If that is the case, then inshallah it gets to the point of resolution. If not, then we need someone outside to help us. This is where you need the help of an arbitrator. This is when you need the help of a judge from who knows Allah's laws, who understands Islam, who understands family relations, and who understands the society that you are living in, the context of your problem, right? Sometimes I've heard, for example, two people, husband and wife, they have a problem, and so they went to talk to someone, on the phone. They did a kind of like a Skype or Zoom conversation with somebody who was living in Kuwait, who was living in Saudi Arabia. And the kind of problems that this couple was having, this person never encountered because this was never an issue in their society. Rarely was a problem. So he's trying to offer advice, and as well intentioned as he was, and a good person, he was not aware of the social circumstances. This is important. This is important. We have ulama here, we have scholars who live in America, who understand the situation in America, who understand what it's like living in this society where all the rules are going, not every single one, but so many of them are not, you know, uh, um, in line with Islam. How does a person solve the problems there? This is important. So, yes, the arbitrator has to have knowledge. He has to be pious. He has to be a person who's God conscious and has taqwa, but he must also be aware of the situation and circumstances of the society. He has to be brave. This is also important. How many times someone has come to a sheikh, to a scholar, or to a person who they felt was knowledgeable or had these qualities. And yes, they were knowledgeable about what's right and wrong. They understood about relationships in Islam. They were knowledgeable about society and circumstances, but they were not brave. They were weak when it came to telling you are right or you are wrong. They were weak when it came to having to announce and arbitrate and say that this is the right ruling, this is the wrong ruling, you did this was okay or this was not okay. That right there is one of the most difficult moments for a lot of people. The passing of judgment on an issue and saying who's right and who's wrong, this is something that a lot of people, they're not able to do. They're not able to do. There was a situation where a couple came to a person who was of knowledge, and he was a good person, and he was mu'min, and he understood the situation in America, but was just not brave enough. The husband said, this happened, this is my problem. And the wife said, this happened, and this is the problem. And he stood at both of them, and he kind of just was smiling. Hmm, hmm. And they got both frustrated with him. This was They never agreed on anything. They both agreed that they were frustrated with this person because he wasn't giving any answers. He wasn't giving any direction. He wasn't saying that, I understand what you're saying, but this is the right way. This is what Islam says, or this is not the right way to do things. This is a solution. He just smiled. He smiled and he looked at the husband, he looked at the wife, and he looked at the husband, he looked at the wife, and he just was smiling there. Inshallah, not giving any solutions, not helping them to understand who's right in this situation. He didn't say anything. He just kind of melted right there in his chair. So this is not the kind of arbitrator that we're talking about. Yeah, someone has to be brave enough. There was another situation where the arbitrator was a friend of one of the families. So two families came. These two families are having some problems. The arbitrator was a friend of family A, very close, known them for a long time. Not so much family B. So when they're asking for a solution, the arbitrator felt shy to tell family A that they were wrong. This is someone's haq. This is someone's right. The arbitrator felt shy because they knew the family. And he didn't want to tell them that they were wrong. Even though the other family was right, he didn't want to give them their right because he felt shy. He felt that he wasn't brave enough to do that. So these qualities are all important. There's something else which um, I've touched on in the other parts of the series. I'm going to reiterate it because it's so important. It's so important. Whose law? Allah's law. Whose law? Allah's law. We need to get that into our thick skulls. We need to really understand whose law we are talking about. I'm going to give you an example. First of all, let me preface this by explaining, especially when it comes to family court and family relations. Family court in the United States of America or in many Western countries, any place where it's not according to Allah's law, when it's not according to Islam, of course there's going to be some problems. Of course. The value system is different. The currency is totally different, right? And for a Muslim, it is not la yajuz It is not permissible. جایز نیست for for one Muslim to refer to the non-Muslim court system for arbitration, judgment, or to achieve justice. It's not permissible. If there's any other way, and there's always a knowledgeable scholar who understands Islamic law who you can refer to, who is brave and who can tell the truth. But going to this court system is not the answer, and it is not permissible. I'm so surprised at people when they just think that, you know what, if you have a family problem, you just go to court. They don't care what Islam says. They don't care if their act is something haram. They don't even care. It's shocking. It is completely shocking. How can a court system that doesn't recognize Allah give you the right ruling? How can a court system that does not recognize your religion, your God, your values as a human being, how is it going to give you justice? Unless you don't want justice. You just want what you want. I'm just trying to get this thing. I'm trying to get that thing. And I want this system to try to help me get it. And you're not concerned about justice. There's a time, yes, there is a time when all of these steps are exhausted. No alim will come and help you. There is no person of justice to come and help you to resolve your problem. Or you're willing to go and get justice from the right source, but the other party doesn't want to, and they force your hand in this court system. If you're compelled and you're forced to, that's a different issue. But we're talking about people of their own free will, of their own volition, of their own accord, that willfully walk into this court system and ask for justice, when this court system knows nothing about the laws of marriage in Islam, knows nothing and cares nothing about these parameters, and cannot make judgment legally about things as far as Islam is saying. They don't care about what Islam says about anything. I'm going to give you a couple of examples because I think that this issue I really wanted to hit home. I want people to understand how how severe it is and what we're talking about, what we're dealing with in society. There's a phenomenon, right? There's a phenomenon of that's happening in Western countries, um, in America, in the UK. It's very bad in America, and that is the issue of children, a parental abduction. A parent takes their kid and runs off, and in a lot of these cases, it's a woman taking children and running off. For example, husband and wife have a disagreement, or they've had disagreements, and the wife will take the children and run away, go somewhere else, go to another state, tell the police, and making up false accusations to be able to get support of the system. And this isn't something that happened in an isolated case. There are fathers' rights groups that are speaking out against this happening. Um, there are so many cases where the court system has completely failed. Unfortunately, there are Muslim cases, several of them, not one or two. I'm not talking about an isolated incident. I'm talking about a phenomenon. There are several cases where Muslim women are taking children, running away from their homes. In some cases, in a lot of these cases, making false claims and accusations in order to get custody of their children through this system, right? Because of the laws that exist. Domestic violence laws that exist where you don't have to prove, it doesn't have to be true. As long as you say it, then most court systems will give people, some kind of protection. So a person can be dishonest and utilize the system. I've been involved with families who've had this happen to them. And some of these are Muslims in multiple situations, taking children and running away. Now, if they go to an Islamic court, if they go to an Islamic judge, if they go to someone who understands as a Muslim arbitrator who has those qualities that we mentioned, and they're looking at the situation, then the way that custody works may be different than what would happen in the court. But sometimes people are not concerned about this thing. They're not concerned about what's haq and what's right. As an example, the courts oftentimes don't have any problem to give a full custody or a large amount of custody to mothers. Islam has a different view and different perspective. Boys at the age of 2 years old, they should be the primary care of their father in the unfortunate event of separation and divorce. Girls from the age of 7 should be in the care of their father, the primary care. Now, this also means that there should be as respectful parameters where there's communication and children are allowed to see each parent, but the primary care is in this way. But if you go to this system, they don't observe this and they don't recognize this. They may say that, you know what, we don't care about any of this. We're going to give full custody in this way. There's people who have, like I was saying, there's a lot of fathers' rights groups that are trying to advocate to change some of these laws, like laws about domestic violence, for example. And by no means, by absolutely no means, is Islam promoting any kind of domestic abuse or violence. But what the complaint that exists is that this is being used, claims are being used as a way to get taken advantage in the system. So much so that there's articles that say that almost every time that there's a divorce with custody, someone at that time remembers all of a sudden, oh yes, I was a victim of abuse. Does that mean that abuse is never happening? No. But in so many cases, there's no need to prove anything. That's very different than Islam. Islam is not suggesting that people just that people abuse, fall and use false claims, and be able to do that because the system has a problem. Right? We're doing all these protests and things about police brutality. The system is a problem that allows police brutality to happen. It's not an isolated case of this officer that killed George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Tamir Rice or Michael Brown or Philando Castile or um, Rayshard Brooks. These are not about isolated instances. It's an entire system that allows someone to have this much authority and to abuse it. In family court, it's no different. The problem is that there is a system that says, hey, if you do make these false claims, you may benefit from them. What will prevent people from having good conscience? This is where Islam differs very much from this system. I'll give you another example. Adultery. Adultery, where someone goes outside of their marriage and they commit zina with someone. Adultery is not illegal in most states. Let's first get that out of the way. You have to understand, adultery is not considered at all a problem in most states. Yes, it could be a reason if you want to have divorce. It could be considered grounds for divorce, but there is no punishment or there's no jail time or there's nothing. If someone commits adultery, then they do. This is the kind of what do they say in Farsi? Hawa parast. This is the kind of uh, 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 system which says do whatever you feel, not what's right. Whatever you feel that you want to do. Um, in some places, it's considered a crime, though. Let me give you an example. In the state of Maryland, adultery is considered a crime, and it used to be that if you committed this crime of adultery, that you would have to pay a fine of $10. Okay, this is very different than what Islam says. And Islam saying adultery is not allowed. It's not allowed. It's prohibited. It's not acceptable. It's not, yeah, if you do it, just, pay $10 and you're good. Really? So this is where we have to understand that this is a system that is not bound by the values that you and I have. The Muslim community has a set of values, or they should have a set of values according to Allah and the Quran and the teachings of the al-Bayt, the teachings of the Prophet. And if you're going to this system that doesn't share your values, that feels like, people fornicate sometimes, big deal, that doesn't see any problem with that. Islam does not say it's okay to have sex outside of marriage. It's not okay. We have a value system where we feel that that's lewd, that is obscene, that is indecent. We're not okay with that as a value system. But if you go to this society, this is just not a problem. How many Muslims have decided to go to non-Muslim counselors for their solutions? And this non-Muslim counselor is saying these kind of things. People going to non-Muslim counselor and telling them that my child is, you know, uh, fornicating with someone. They're drinking alcohol, and they're saying, well, are they 18? Okay. Are they 21? Okay. Then that's fine with us. This is the problem, is when we reduce ourselves and our value as human beings, as Muslims, and we go to look to a system to solve our problems with some other metric, some other measurement outside of Islam. We do have an idea that laws of the land are respectable, right? Whatever the laws in society are, we as Muslims, we live in America, we respect the laws of the land. But if it's saying that something's permissible, it's not saying that you have to do these things. It's saying that according to their system, they don't see any problem with. But it's not preventing me from not doing it. So in that case, I have a responsibility to stay away from those things. A Muslim can't say, well, it's permissible to drink in America, so I can drink. No, no one is making you drink. There's no obligation. If you do so of your own accord, then you're in Allah's eyes, you're doing something wrong. You've transgressed. I'm going to wrap up this discussion by putting something into perspective about judgment. And as I said before, um, uh, you know, this should be reserved for the person who has the right qualities. There's a place in hellfire, and the hadith right now escapes me this with a specific name, but there is a place in hellfire that has a name. And when Allah created this particular place in hellfire, the place was so blazing hot that it complained to Allah that you have made me, I can barely tolerate myself. And this place was a place for who? This place was a person who was a judge, because many judges will end up in that place. Now, don't get me wrong, the role of the person who is the arbitrator, who causes reconciliation, who has those values, it's a extremely honorable position. Very important and necessary in every community. However, if they are not with those qualities, and if they do not are not very strict about their being just and being fair, they could end up in that very special place for people who are judges who made those kind of mistakes. There's another hadith that talks about, and I want us to put into perspective how we should not try to involve ourselves in being the judge and jury of personal matters of other people if we are not qualified, right? Imam Ali alayhi salam says that don't get caught up in this domestic disputes. You don't know a lot of the times what's going on. You have no idea. You know, people love to people love to take screenshots of things these days, sound bites, and they might share this. I mean, I've seen this happen to a lot of people. Somebody takes a sound bite of something someone said. Somebody takes a screenshot of a piece of a conversation. And then they go and say that, oh, look at what happened. Look at how this person treated me. Look at what they're saying. And what are they saying? They're not really saying anything. They're just trying to get someone to validate what they're saying. They're not allowing someone to know the context of the situation. They're trying to focus on a very particular thing that was said. If two people come before you, right, and one of them has a black eye, and he says, this other person hit me, I have a black eye. The other person says, no, that's not exactly what happened. If you're put in the middle and you have to judge, you're going to need more information. But what happens? We rush, we're hasty, we pass judgment. No, this is right, this is wrong. This person's right or this person's wrong. A person in that case might quickly pass judgment and say that, you know what, you hit this person, you're wrong. But is it that simple? If the person hit that person in retaliation when that person attacked them with a knife, are they still wrong? Is it the same? It's not the same. Were they standing there and the person came and just hit them in the face? Or was this a retaliation? So if we know the details, the context, the facts, the totality of what's happening, the whole picture, then we can understand. Maybe we can judge better. But most times we rush with a little bit of information. Just a little bit of information. Please, I'm going to advise you to learn 3 words. Learn 3 words. And use these words every time someone comes and tells you a problem. Before you answer anything, the very first thing you have to ask is what? Is this true? Is this true? If you can't confidently answer that question, then you do not need to go in defense of one person or the other person. When you have facts presented before you, you have to accept whatever is the truth. You know, it talks about different groups of qadi, of judges. There's a group of judges, people who arbitrate, and they don't know what the right answer is, and they say the wrong answer, right? So they don't have the right information, they don't know the right answer, and they say the wrong answer. That person is a group that's going to hellfire, it says. There's another group. They don't know the right answer, but by accident, they do say the right answer. It says this group is still going to hellfire because they didn't know what they were talking about. And the only group is the group that knows the right answer and gives the right answer. That group is the only group of people, of judges, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that they are in the right. I'm going to end on a story about Prophet Dawood. Prophet Dawood, peace be upon him, he was a prophet, but he was also a judge. Like many of the prophets of their times, they were judges as well. They would deal with people when they come, when they have some conflict. They come and they say, solve our problem for us. You've heard about some of these stories. People come and they have a problem. They go to the imam, they go to the prophet, and they give them the right, insightful advice with basira. And this is where I'm emphasizing that that idea of that we have to go to people of wisdom, people who are qualified, the right people, because even in the cases of the right people, here is given an example in this story where Prophet Dawood asks God to give him the insight, the basira, and the wisdom to know the judgment of the akhirah. Pay attention. Prophet Dawood, Prophet David, peace be upon him, he says to Allah, please give me the basira and insight to know what would be the judgment of Yawm al-Qiyamah, of the day of judgment. Because sometimes, as we said, what we see on the surface is not exactly what's happening, right? They bring a young boy and an old man to Prophet Dawood. The old man said, this boy stole grapes from my house. The boy had grapes in his hand, grape juice on his clothes, and it was very clear that he took the grapes. At that very moment, Allah reveals the judgment of the akhirah, the judgment of the next life, not what it looks like on the surface. And when Allah revealed this to Prophet Dawood, he commands that the ruling and verdict is we must behead this old man. This old man must receive a death sentence. What? People will be confused. What are you talking about? This is an easy, open, shut case. This person's complaining about someone stealing. They still have the thing in their hand. It should be open and shut. And he explains the wisdom and what was revealed to him by Allah's knowledge of the judgment of the next life. And what was revealed to him was that this old man had taken advantage of this boy's parents. This boy was an orphan. And this old man took advantage of his parents. He killed this boy's parents, made him an orphan, and then he stole the property that he's currently living in, which had the grapes that this boy took. And so, in reality, this house and those grapes were the property of this young orphan. It belonged to him. And this old man was actually a murderer. So the judgment of what really is and what something looks like sometimes is different. Let's not be hasty. You're right, you're wrong. No, let's not rush. Let's refer to the people who have some insight and who are qualified to do that job. Arbitration, reconciliation, this could solve so many problems in our families. Instead of referring to the right sources, sometimes we get hasty. We say things, we decide things, we accept things that we shouldn't. Let's hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us all the tawfiq to truly understand His plan, His path, and the beautiful religion of Islam, and become practitioners which apply the beautiful religion of Islam in every aspect of our own lives. Let us be people who are not just wise, but just and fair and merciful in our dealings and relationships with others. Let's practice the tradition of the Prophet with clemency, with forbearance, and with kindness when dealing with others. And let's remember that that is a source and a reflection of our faith and our intellect. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasten the coming of the 12th Imam, Imam Mahdi, Ajalullah ta'ala Farajuhu Sharif. Let's close and recite together. Please, you at home as well, please recite Dua Faraj, and let's renew our commitment to the Imam of our time, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توءا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Please tune in next week at the same time. Inshallah, we'll be continuing the series of family matters, but with a new topic. We've finished the this sub series or the subtopic of conflict resolution, and we're going to move on to a new topic, which will be announced this week, inshallah. Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.